Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. We have a great show here for you tonight. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is Wednesday, September 9th, 2015. When we're not here, you can check out our information by going to www.arh.noaa.gov, or you can call our information hotline at 1-800-472-0391. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Now on to the important weather of the day. We do have a surf advisory that's out here across the Bering Strait down to St. Lawrence Island. High surf advisory is in effect from 6 p.m. this evening to 6 p.m. on Thursday evening. We're expecting waves out here to be heights between 8 to 12 feet. Also across the southeast, this orange color here is for a watch that is out. This is a flood watch that's we're looking out at the weather system for Thursday afternoon through Friday afternoon. Just be aware that they're going to be receiving high amounts of rain, which we're going to get to in just a moment. So let's first take a look at the jet stream out here running along the southern area of the Aleutian chain. This is bringing a conveyor belt of moisture up towards the Gulf. Meanwhile, just kind of weaker pattern across the western Bering with a northerly flow, some low clouds just not showing up here on satellite. So let's take a look closer to home, and here's that large swath of moisture that I mentioned just a moment ago. It's streaming up into the Gulf with the focus here being back towards the Alaska Peninsula. This system has been organizing for the last 30 hours. So here's the center spinning right towards Sand Point, and as you can see, it's streamed some moisture out ahead with a system that moved along yesterday evening. And so let's just take one more look at that spin. The system is organizing and it's going to be moving north. Checking out the surface maps from today, here's a low pressure system associated with it. It's a 984 millibar low, not terribly strong, but the fact that the system is now stacked with a surface low right below the low aloft, this is going to allow these tight gradients around the low pressure system to cause some gusty winds all across the Gulf waters back towards south central and even into the eastern areas of the Bering, as we have this colder air mass that's dropping into the Bering south of the Aleutian chain. Some shower activity going on there this afternoon. However, really low impact there. Winds are out there between 25 to 35 miles per hour. Along the northern areas of the Gulf, we see a good amount of rain just developing and moving into the Panhandle area late this afternoon, with some rain showers occurring ahead of this system across the interior. Now we have a transition as the stationary boundary between the warmer air mass along and south of the Brooks Range, and then a colder air mass just nudging in. And it's kind of been sitting here for the last few days. We've been seeing some snow showers, really no accumulation thus far to speak about. And then areas where it's cleared out, they're still keeping patchy fog. So cold and cooler along the coast there. So as we head into your evening tonight, you're going to notice an increase of winds across the south central areas and back towards the southwest. They're possibly going to be dropping off as the center of the low just passes into the Bristol Bay area. However, the winds will be on the rise for Kodiak Island and the Kenai Peninsula. So we're looking at winds to increase between 30 to 40 miles per hour tonight, with some gusts through channel terrain up to 60 to 65 miles per hour, really picking up through the channel terrain in Turnagain Arm. So expect gusty conditions there. We also have gusts along the north and west coast where they're also experiencing the foggy conditions. Light snow will continue along that stationary boundary, with lighter showers out towards the Bering. And then across the Gulf waters, we'll see also the increase of winds between 20 and 35 miles per hour, higher gusts up to mainly 40 miles per hour across the waters here. And then across the southeast, expect some gusty winds to begin to develop in this area as well. We do have some rain that's going to be pushing into the Panhandle, and then will still remain a little bit dry between systems across much of the southeastern half of the area overnight. But as we head into your day tomorrow, this moisture will follow along the jet stream, which will start to point more towards the southeastern direction. So be aware that the winds are going to be on the increase out there as well, between 40 and 55 miles per hour, as this frontal boundary begins to push inland on Thursday. Now, the biggest challenge with this system is because it's a developing stacked system, it's eventually going to pick up some momentum north. So we'll see rain across a large area tomorrow. However, there is a good clearing area behind the swath of rain. So once that clears out, we're still going to continue to see those gusty conditions. So we'll lose the rain towards the afternoon and possibly earlier if this system picks up momentum. And then we'll see a clearing of the skies with those gusts between, again, 40 to 65 miles per hour through the channel terrain along the Kenai, mainly between 30 and 40 miles per hour. Now across the central areas, they'll see some shower activity continuing, and then this next system will be approaching and bringing this rain into the north. Along the northern coast and back towards the northwest, they have a high pressure system off to the northwest here, a high pressure system directly to the north. This is going to keep the gradient along the Arctic coast and northwest fairly tight. So they're going to see a strong north to northeasterly flow between 25 and 35 miles per hour. And then all across the eastern areas of the Gulf, continued 20 to 35 mile per hour gusty conditions with some patchy fog along the coast there and some light rain for your Thursday forecast. Now across the Bering, we do have a ridge moving in, so the wind speeds are going to drop off a little bit more on Friday between 15 and 25 miles per hour. The strongest winds on Friday will be across the southeast and across the channel terrain, mainly Turnagain Arm as we head into Friday. Now we'll continue to see some showery conditions and a cooler air mass overall, moderating temperatures as we head into the end of the week, but not terribly cold. The coldest temperatures are going to stay lodged up along the north coast and the northwest areas, with a transition to rain and snow that's been occurring for the last 24 hours, just seeing that rain and snow line just south of the Brooks Range. And this will get a little bit warmer across the Seward Peninsula on Friday, so expect to see a changeover of light rain to possibly light snow. Heaviest snow amounts will be experienced on the northwest coast only on Friday, just light shower activity. Storm totals across the eastern areas of the Brooks Range will be between 2 and 5 inches on average. Elsewhere, they shouldn't see too much snow accumulation. However, let's keep a watch on that northwest coast as we head into your Friday. So all areas should be aware. The flood watches across the Panhandle down through the southeast for rain between 2 to 6 inches, higher amounts across the Panhandle, and the flood watches for lakes, streams, and any area waters, and possibly causing mudslides to occur. So stay on the lookout for that. However, for today, our temperatures got very warm across the southeast, up into 65 actually at Gustavus, and 65 was observed at Eagle, and the rest of the south central area around the Gulf were pretty much in the mid-50s. Along the northern tier of the state, they only saw temperatures in the lower 30s and back into the upper 30s as you head towards the Seward Peninsula. Coldest there at Anatuvik Pass at 28 degrees. And then down towards the southwest, a quick rise in temperatures here from the 40s up into the mid 50s to upper 60s. That 27 degrees, that's an incorrect value, is actually 50 degrees on the south side here. And then coming around the southwest, all in the mid 50s out through the Alaska Peninsula. A little bit cooler across the Bering with that air mass coming through, keeping temperatures around the upper 40s, and 55 out at Shimia. Now watch for temperatures for tonight. They're not going to drop terribly low across the Bering, kind of moderating at 40, in the mid 40s all across the waters. And then across the southwest, you can see the temperatures are in the mid 40s, as well as much of south central, as that cloud cover is going to keep it from dropping too much. Across the southeast in the lower 50s, and coldest across the north and northwest coast in the upper 20s. Now looking at your temperatures for tomorrow, they should increase the most across the central interior up to near 60 degrees again. And then across the coastal areas and back down towards the southeast, we'll see temperatures there in the upper 50s once again, coolest along the north and west in the mid 30s to upper 30s, and a quick warm up towards the southwest in the lower 50s. And much of the Bering will again be in the mid to upper 50s. Now looking at your flying weather across the state, of course, with all the clouds that are impacting the area, that's going to continue through much of tomorrow. And then it might clear out a little bit sooner than what we thought, because we do have, it just depends on how fast that system lifts out. But for the most part, the southeast is going to stay down in fog with rain conditions all across the southeast. So expect MVFR, IFR conditions all the way back towards the Alaska Range and down through towards the Kodiak on the Aleutian Mountains there. Now, conditions will be widespread MVFR for the most part, with some breaks across the central interior areas. The north coast will be down in IFR for most of the day, as well as across the far extreme western Bering. They could see with the ridging that's trying to move up in there, they might see those conditions go down into the IFR. Now breaking this down into your passes, we have Inutuvik, which will be IFR tomorrow, as well as Adigan Pass. And then Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will be IFR, possibly improving to MVFR during the afternoon. See, Rainy Pass will be IFR for most of the day, and then we'll see Windy IFR possibly improving to MVFR during the afternoon, depending on how quick that system moves out. Isabel IFR to MVFR, and we're expecting Mentasta to stay at MVFR for most of the day. Tanita will be IFR to MVFR, and Portage will be IFR with possible MVFR conditions across the western areas. Looking at Chilkoot and White Pass, they've been IFR actually all day today, and that trend will continue into tomorrow. Now looking at your freezing levels right here along the southern area of the Brooks Range, all along the north coast, and then we have your upper levels between 2,000 to 4,000 feet across the central interior, increasing down to 8,000 to 10,000 feet across the Gulf. Across the Bering, we're seeing 2,000 across the Bering Strait, and then an increase out towards the western Aleutians to 8,000 feet. Your icing for tomorrow, your concerns are going to be across the Brooks Range, especially where that stationary boundary is, and the low pressure system down to the south. So look for the most severe conditions to be across that eastern Brooks Range. Also for the southeast, expect isolated conditions through the day tomorrow. Now the jet stream is currently amplifying across the south central areas between 120 to 100 knots. So this is where we're going to be ushering all that moisture. So it's definitely going to be pushing inland tomorrow. And here's the 9,000 foot level between 25 and 45 knots around this low pressure system, with slightly stronger southerly winds between 40 and 50 knots across the Gulf. Strong jet at 9,000 feet. 60 knots coming into the southeast, and a northerly flow across the northern areas of the state down to the Bering, and that's between 25 and 40 knots with the strongest winds across the Bering Strait. Now looking at your 3,000 foot level, stack system, here it is, 3,000. We've got that 35 to 40 knots across the Gulf waters flowing up inland, decreasing to 20 to 25 knots as you go to the north, and a change of direction across the western areas of the state, and northerly also across the Bering between 20 and 35 knots. Again, strongest winds are across the southeast. Turbulence tomorrow are going to be all around this low pressure system, north coast, west coast. So be on the lookout for with turbulence below 5,000 feet. We'll be back in just a moment with your marine forecast.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the Augmented Reality Sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this Sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. It allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
well, that's what happened at GINA up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And
Yeah.
you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have? You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking
kidding.
Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
All right, back to the show, and here we'll take a quick look at the ice edge. We haven't seen much change from yesterday, and so mainly just the Barren Islands here, we have some ice there. Otherwise, it's still open at the surface for the most part. Okay, across the southeast for tomorrow, Thursday, we're expecting small craft across most of the area between 25 and 30 knots. The highest across the inner channels, and seas will be between 5 and 6 feet. The outer waters will be seeing between 10 and 12 feet, all out of the south direction. Now your Friday is when the winds start picking up. Gales here across the southern channels and across the outer waters. So look for that gale criteria, mainly out of the south across the inner channels between 20 and 25 knots. And then the outer waters will mainly be out of the west direction, becoming more southerly as you head up towards Yakutat. Now the seas will be between 5 and 7 feet on your Friday, and between 11 to 15 feet as you head towards the Dixon entrance. Looking at the western Gulf waters and Prince William Sound, very strong winds here. Tomorrow out of the south, 25 knots, small craft across most of the area. Gales as you head towards the Barren Islands on the east side and the south side of Kodiak at 35 knots out of the south and southwest direction. Across Shelikof and towards the Cook Inlet, all between 20 and 25 knots, and the seas across the Cook Inlet will be 4 feet, 6 feet across the Sound, and then between 13 to 16 feet across the Gulf waters, with the Barren Islands seeing some 6-foot seas towards the west side of the Barrens, and Shelikof Strait right around 14 feet. Now as we head into your Friday forecast, expect mostly small craft to be confined across the Gulf waters, all out of the south direction. Prince William Sound and the northern and southern inlet is going to be 15 knots out of the south and east direction, and then the Barren Islands and Shelikof Strait between 15 to 20 knots there out of the south-southwest. And then we'll see seas 4 feet across the Cook Inlet and Barren Islands, except 3 feet up at the Prince William Sound. Western waters will be between 9 to 11 feet. Shelikof will see also 9 feet. Looking at your Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and the Pacific side will be pretty gusty winds there as well, except for Bristol Bay out of the northwest at 20. Gale criteria across the south side of the peninsula there at 35 knots out of the southwest. Bering will see 5 knots, and the seas on the Pacific side will be between 9 and 16 feet. Now looking at Friday, we'll see a north to northwesterly flow, also towards the west as you head towards Kodiak there. Small craft for Bristol Bay, and then we'll see seas on this day between 6 and 9 feet across the Bering, and the Pacific side between 7 and 8 feet. Looking across the Aleutians, they're going to be a very uniform wind, all small craft criteria, except for the south and just south of the eastern Aleutians there at 20 knots. And then the seas here on this day will be mainly between 7 to 10 feet. The highest seas will be towards the central and western areas. On Friday, we'll see the same wind direction and a little bit lighter wind speeds between 15 and 20 knots across the entire area. Seas will be between 7 to 10 feet with a higher seas towards the eastern Aleutians on that day. The western coast will see 35 knots across most of the area, gale criteria, except just to the south of Nunivak Island, small crafts there, with 11 to 13 feet across most of the area, a little bit lower seas, 7 feet just south of Nunivak Island. On Friday, change direction, more northwesterly flow. Small crafts there between 20 and 30 knots across the area. The highest wind speeds up here towards St. Lawrence Island, and seas would be between 8 to 10 feet for the most part on Friday. Now on the north and northwest coast, they'll see small craft on Friday, except towards Kotzebue Sound. We'll see a 35-knot wind all out of the north and east direction, with seas between 7 to 10 feet, with the highest seas near Kotzebue Sound. Heading into your Friday forecast, highest winds will be across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast at gales 35 knots, and small craft for the rest of the area, seas between 7 to 10 feet, highest seas out at the Beaufort Seacoast. Now, rain, rain, and more rain and snow along the north coast. That's going to be the theme all the way through tomorrow, with some gusty winds between 40 to 60 miles per hour across the southeast and south central areas. This system will push north, keeping winds a little bit up through Thursday afternoon before they start tapering off, with this rain system beginning to taper off most of the area, except for be on the lookout for the south.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.